Hello everyone. This is the 8th part of the story, Marvel Unlimited Skills, I Can Download. Chapter 58, Loki. In the dark sky, a Quinjet appeared in the clouds. It was Bruce and the rest making their move, after having discovered Loki's location. Inside the jet, Bruce and Captain America were standing in the cabin, ready to make their move at any time. We have located our target. It seems that he is killing people. The Black Widow frowned slightly as she looked at Loki in his green robe on the screen. The captain, already in combat gear, readied his shield and said, "We have to hurry up." After which, he jumped out of the jet with a parachute on his back. Bruce, who was standing next to him, not one to get left behind, also quickly put on his parachute and jumped. After all, he couldn't let Iron Man get ahead of him, otherwise he would lose energy value. Now all he had to do was find the right opportunity. Moreover, if he caught Loki, he would develop the plot, which would in turn get him closer to unlocking a new function. By the time Bruce arrived, Captain America and Loki had already begun fighting, and as expected, Loki had the advantage. After all, Loki was a god, whereas Captain America had only just recovered his fighting capability. Naturally, he was not Loki's rival, at least not yet. Bang! Captain America's shield was blown away after a loud noise was heard. Bruce's eyes flashed, and in less than a second, only his shadow was left behind. Just as Loki wanted to unleash his strongest attack that would put an end to Captain America, he suddenly felt something that made him stop. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. There were 5 flying knives coming at him from different angles, each of them having great power. Boom! While Loki had indeed felt something, he was nonetheless blown away from the knives and heavily fell down to the ground. While he had been caught by surprise, he was not harmed at all. Who? Which ant dares to attack a god? Loki roared. By now, Bruce had arrived, and he really wanted to know exactly just how strong this so-called god was. Without any unnecessary movements, Bruce's speed made him turn into a dark shadow as his hands threw dozens of flying knives once again. When the flying knives tore through the air, Loki managed to spot Bruce's location. He instantly raised his scepter and swung towards Bruce, who was running at him. But despite being a mere human, Bruce was extremely fast, more so than the captain. He raised his hands, which had become as strong as metal, and fought directly against Loki. Bang! The strength Bruce released was not very strong, but Loki was also not very good at close combat, so for the time being no one had the upper hand in the fight. Clone! And all of a sudden, there were 2 Bruces. What? Loki's face changed. He actually couldn't figure out which Bruce was the real one in a short period of time. The current scene also made Captain America's face change. In their previous spar, Bruce actually hadn't used his whole strength to fight against him. Boom! As he couldn't come up with a solution to his current predicament, Loki raised his scepter and released a powerful blast towards both bodies. The whole area around Bruce had exploded, and as both Bruces were impacted, the clone version of him had disappeared. As soon as Loki saw that there was only one Bruce remaining, he immediately made his move and appeared in front of Bruce. He raised his scepter and held it against Bruce's chest. Seeing what was happening, Black Widow and Captain America's faces both changed color drastically. Damn it! Ever since Hawkeye was controlled, the top brass of S.H.I.E.L.D. figured out that Loki's scepter had a special function by which he could control a human's mind. As Black Widow and Captain America were already struggling against Loki, if he managed to control Bruce, the situation would become extremely dire. Meanwhile, Loki looked at Bruce with a creepy smile on his face as he said, "God will let you understand what the nature of the world is." After saying that, he waved his scepter, but the glowing light of the scepter suddenly disappeared. What? Loki was shocked to find out that the scepter in his hand didn't have any effect on Bruce. This is the so-called power this god relied on? Bruce smiled. At this time, Loki's face changed color, and his eyes were full of doubt. The power of the scepter in his hands was terrifying, mostly because of its unique capability of being able to control every human's mind. And yet unexpectedly, this human from Earth right in front of him was unaffected. What the hell was going on? Just as Loki was doubting himself, Bruce launched his counterattack. He caught Loki with one hand, and grabbed the scepter with the other. As soon as he did, both of their information was displayed in front of him. Name, Loki Odinson. Identity, Odin's adopted son, the god of mischief and trickery, an evil god. Ability, Ice Giant's body, energy value, 500, Ice Giant's strength, energy value, 1000, magic power, energy value, 500, residual limb connection, data, 1000 gigabytes, longevity gene, data, 1000 GB, virus and disease immunity, data, 500 gigabytes. Loki's scepter, mind gem, cosmic level power, temporarily unable to download. When Bruce saw Loki's abilities, the surprise he felt was revealed on his face. Loki was a so-called god, but his abilities could not even be compared to the Hulk's. But after a moment of surprise, he could understand why. After all, not all gods were equally strong. The abilities that needed energy value Bruce didn't even give a thought to, he couldn't afford them yet anyway. But the most frustrating thing for him was that he couldn't download the Mind Gem yet. Downloading the Mind Gem had been one of his most important goals in this trip to fight Loki. After all, it was one of the most powerful magic weapons in the whole Marvel universe. After releasing a small sigh, Bruce accepted the facts. After all, it was a bit ridiculous to think that he could download such a powerful weapon when his strength was not yet even close to that level. If he wanted to control the power of the Infinity Stones, he must first have strength comparable to actual gods. Even so, he wasn't disappointed for very long, for as long as he had enough time to grow, he would download all of the Infinity Stones sooner or later. As for the rest of Loki's abilities, there were only 3 that he could download. The residual limb connection he had no need for because he already had Hulk's regeneration ability. But he definitely wanted to get his hands on the longevity gene and the virus and disease immunity. Loki had already lived for a few thousand years at least, and yet he was showing no signs of old age. It was not even comparable to Black Widow's ability. She could also live for a long time, but not even close to that long. He also wanted to get Loki's virus and disease immunity, since he would be immune to every single virus and disease on Earth, and he wouldn't have to worry that his enemies would poison him. After thinking along those lines, Bruce chose to download both abilities without any further hesitation. This was the perfect time to download abilities off of Loki, as after this Loki would be locked up in a helicarrier which was originally built for the Hulk by S.H.I.E.L.D. And once Loki was locked up, it would be extremely difficult for Bruce to download any of his abilities. Beep, connection successful. Beep, longevity gene, size 1000 GB, download initializing. Beep, virus and disease immunity, size 500 GB, download initializing. Beep, current download speed is 5 MB/s, valid within 20 meters. After hearing those familiar words, Bruce immediately bought the 1000x speedup. He didn't want any accidents this time around. Although, that was still $1 million and Bruce's heart ached as soon as he made the purchase. But regardless, strengthening himself was the best course of action. Chapter 59, Battle. As Bruce was downloading, on the other side of the battle, Captain America's face revealed the surprise he felt. Unexpectedly, Loki's scepter didn't have any effect on Bruce. It seemed that his strength was better than he imagined. Be careful. The next moment, a knife appeared in Loki's hand, and he instantly stabbed towards Bruce. Although he wanted to feign surrendering, he would absolutely not allow a mere mortal to beat him. Just as Loki made his move, however, Bruce immediately reacted. With his superior strength, he held Loki up high and threw him to the ground, this time even more heavily. Boom! Loki's face instantly warped. He knew he couldn't defend himself against such powerful strength. But it wasn't over just yet. Bruce carried him up by his clothes and threw him heavily to the ground again, the same way the Hulk had done in the movie. At this time, Bruce looked just like a wild beast. He threw Loki around again and again. It was as if Loki was a rag doll. This time around, Captain America was not the only one shocked, but Black Widow as well. This scene was just too outrageous. Just which one of them was the god here? As soon as they saw what was happening, they froze in place, speechless. After Bruce smashed Loki 4 to 5 times without pausing, Loki had paled and fell down to the ground from another huge hit. At this moment, his eyes were full of shock and despair. Where did this mortal come from, and why is he so powerful and violent? These were the only thoughts that went on in Loki's head. Beep, the battle has finished, the host has obtained 20 points of energy value. Beep, download complete. Beep, congratulations, you have obtained the longevity gene. Beep, congratulations, you have obtained virus and disease immunity. Just as Bruce completely and definitively beat Loki, the system sounded out. And sure enough, he was right. As long as he fought, he would obtain that precious energy value. Although he had only obtained 20 points of energy value this time around, the harvest was definitely to his satisfaction. Combined with his previous energy value, he had a total of 40 points now. If he got another 10 points, he could accomplish one of his temporary goals and download Iron Man's Mark 7 armor. And along with the 20 points, Bruce obtained Loki's 2 abilities as well. The moment he obtained Loki's 2 abilities, he felt a mystical energy flow into his body, making his strength improve once again. As long as Bruce could continue to download abilities, he would become stronger and stronger. Digesting the new changes in his body, Bruce's eyes lit up. He was more confident in himself now than ever before. But while he definitely won the fight against Loki, it was also a fact that he knew that Loki was just faking his surrender this time, and plus Loki didn't know his actual strength. Those were 2 big deciding factors in their battle this time. Otherwise, if Loki was in his best condition and it was an even fight, even with how powerful Bruce was right now, he definitely couldn't handle Loki that easily. This time he had caught him unaware. It was a fluke. At this moment, Captain America appeared beside Bruce with a face filled with shock. Bruce's strength was way beyond his wildest imaginations, even he wasn't sure if he could beat Loki, and yet Bruce had done so, and in such a short amount of time too. Bruce took care of Loki in a very violent manner as well. It was more than one man could take in a short period of time. Bruce, you're really strong, Captain America sighed. He was even beginning to admire Bruce. Bruce said nothing in response. He just handed Loki's scepter to the captain instead. Captain, take this. Since he couldn't download the mind gem right now, Bruce intended to keep developing the plot, which would in turn allow him to discover the more powerful functions the system had to offer. Captain America looked at Bruce and nodded seriously. Both Bruce's strength and character had the captain's respect. Whoosh! Just at this time, the both of them heard the tearing of the air, and they both had a pretty good guess of who was responsible for it. And sure enough, soon, Iron Man landed next to them. After pulling up his face armor, Iron Man glanced at Captain America in surprise. Did I miss something? It seems that unexpectedly, this reindeer was subdued by you. Originally, Iron Man had wanted to see how powerful a legendary god was in person, but now it seemed that it was merely above average at best, so he completely lost interest. To be fair to Iron Man, right now, Loki did in fact really look like a reindeer more than a human being. Mr. Bruce, you're also here. When Iron Man spotted Bruce, he was a bit surprised. From the information Coulson had given him beforehand, Bruce wasn't on the team. So one could imagine his surprise when he saw Bruce appear. Hello, Mr. Stark. Right now he was still lacking a little energy value, so he couldn't download Iron Man's Mark armor immediately, but Bruce was itching for the chance. Let's go. Although we arrested Loki, we still have a lot of work to do. After saying his piece, the captain took Loki and went inside the Quinjet. The rioting in the area had also stopped, as fortunately S.H.I.E.L.D.'s actions had been relatively quick, so they hadn't lost much. Bruce, who had always kept silent, stared at Iron Man. Yet he didn't make a move as he still had a lot of time left. Regardless, he had definitely made up his mind on obtaining Iron Man's Mark 7 armor. Meanwhile, in the plane, Loki had been locked up by the others. But unexpectedly, he didn't look anxious at all, and instead looked relatively relaxed instead. It was only when he glanced at Bruce did his eyes reveal a bit of fear. After all, the manner in which Bruce had beaten him in their fight would definitely stay in his head for a long time. Didn't he say anything? Iron Man looked at Loki. He still had an expression of not caring about anything as he asked Captain America. Something's wrong. He surrendered way too easily. The captain spoke up about his doubts. This time, their plans had gone way too right. But despite all of that, his intuition told him that this event was definitely not so simple. What? Have you gotten old to the point that your memory's bad? Iron Man jokingly said to the captain. The captain didn't respond though. He knew what kind of person this billionaire was, and he knew that there was no point in persuading him. This guy was really strong. The fact that we caught him so easily indeed raises a lot of doubt. Bruce spoke with a smile on his face as he looked at Loki. Because of Bruce's stare, Loki suddenly felt shock in his heart. Of all the people here, Bruce was the only person he couldn't handle, whether it be in a fight or by controlling him. Are you also doubtful of your strength, Mr. Bruce? Iron Man said. Yet even though he said that, he could feel that Bruce wasn't simple, and definitely confident in himself. What a joke. Mr. Stark, from the people here, no one has more confidence in themselves than me. Bruce said, and no one raised their voice in response. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, the wind acted up and lightning struck again and again. Not one part of the plane was left untouched, and Loki's face got a little dark, almost as if he was nervous. Loki was indeed very nervous, as he knew that man would come. Chapter 60, Three Bigs. As the lightning struck again and again, Black Widow, who was driving the Quinjet, had a very grim expression. This weather is a bit abnormal. She felt that the current situation was very strange. Before they started their current mission, she had prepared extensively, and according to her preparations, there should be no lightning for the next few days. Meanwhile, Captain America also noticed Loki's anomaly. When he looked through the window and saw the lightning strikes, his face got even paler, almost as if he was afraid of something. What, are you afraid of lightning? Captain America asked with a serious look on his face. He thought that this situation was way too strange, so he paid close attention to Loki. While Bruce, who was sitting slightly upright, had a slight glint in his eyes. He is not afraid of the lightning, but of who the lightning represents. As soon as he figured that out, his heart was full of fighting spirit and ready to go once again. As long as he kept fighting, he would obtain energy value. It was as simple as that. It didn't matter if he won or lost. For example, just after a short bout with Loki, he obtained 20 points of energy value. It didn't need to be said just how much more he would obtain after having even a little altercation against Thor, one of the three big shots of the Avengers alliance. While Loki was a god, he was nonetheless very weak in comparison to some of the other gods like his half-brother Thor. Boom! Just as Bruce finished speaking, the whole plane suddenly shook as if it was hit by something. It was at this time that both Iron Man and Captain America realized that something was going on, and prepared for the worst. They knew that someone was coming. Iron Man went to open the cockpit of the plane so they could see just who would appear. In the next moment, a man wearing strong-looking armor and a red cloak appeared, and in one of his hands he seemed to be holding a silver hammer. It was truly Thor, god of thunder and one of the key members of the Avengers alliance. It was at this time that the three, Captain America, Iron Man and Thor, met for the first time in this alternate universe. It was also the first time that Bruce had seen them together, at least in person. Just as Thor landed, he immediately struck towards Iron Man with his hammer, not hesitating for even a second despite the fact that Iron Man appeared to be trying to stop him. Thor was truly too strong, and Iron Man's Mark armor was not his match, at least not yet anyway. Bang! Iron Man heavily fell in the cabin. After dealing with him, Thor captured Loki and jumped out from the jet. Bruce, on the other hand, seeing that his energy value was running away from him, stood up and walked towards the cabin door. Bruce, what are you trying to do? Let me remind you that these are both legendary gods from the myths. As soon as the Black Widow noticed Bruce's behavior, she immediately reminded him. Yeah, Bruce, we need a battle plan. Captain America was also shocked. He could see that Bruce really wanted to chase after those two gods. The gods I know do not dress like clowns. Now listen. I have a plan, and that's to take action immediately. After saying that, Bruce did not look back and jumped off the jet. The captain and Iron Man were shocked once again. Were all young people nowadays so vigorous? I like his character. Iron Man smiled, immediately activated his Mark armor and also jumped out from the jet. The captain looked at the two lunatics with eyes full of helplessness and also put on a parachute before preparing to jump. If these guys really wanted to fight, there was no stopping them. Captain, are you really going? The Black Widow couldn't believe what she was seeing, especially when it came to Bruce, the one that started this. He was a mere level 6 agent, it was nothing worth bragging about even in S.H.I.E.L.D. and yet for some reason he dared to challenge two gods. I have to go, otherwise I can't help them or stop them. The captain did not turn back, he grabbed his vibranium shield and jumped out of the jet as well. What a bunch of crazy people. The Black Widow muttered while shaking her head, she couldn't stop them at this point. She finally understood one of the reasons why the director Nick Fury hadn't launched the Avengers program beforehand. These kinds of people were truly too difficult to manage. Meanwhile, Bruce, who was rapidly falling from the sky, did even think to pull open his parachute as he wouldn't be able to catch the two gods if he did. His goal this time was only Thor, as hopefully after testing the limits of his power against a true god, he would obtain enough points of energy value for the Mark 7 armor. Bang! In the next second, Bruce had smashed against the ground, and not far from him, Thor had already begun fighting with Iron Man once again. In front of him, whether it be Thor or Iron Man, these superheroes were all energy value in his eyes, and he certainly wouldn't miss it. Iron Man was very strong, but if he only relied on his current Mark armor, he had no way of beating Thor, or even becoming a decent opponent for him. Soon afterwards, he too got smashed in the ground. Thor seemed really enraged by Iron Man, and held up his hammer wanting to finish off this pesky opponent once and for all. The power of Thor's hammer was too strong, and if he really swung down this way, Iron Man's armor would not hold up. Whoosh, whoosh. Just as Thor was about to bring his hammer down on Iron Man, Bruce shot a long and dense spiderweb using his spiderweb launcher and wrapped it around Thor, which stopped him in his tracks. Great job, Bruce. Iron Man was still a little flustered and fearful in his heart, this Asgardian was a little too powerful. What? But in just a moment Thor had completely dismantled the web covering his body, and powerful energy started gathering around him. This guy was indeed worthy to be called a god. He also happened to be the strongest opponent Bruce had ever faced after crossing through to the Marvel Universe. Even so, he wasn't worried in the slightest. The vibranium shield flew out from his hands and immediately afterwards, boom. Thor's hammer struck the shield and a dazzling light spread out. Who are you? Thor looked at Bruce and roared. He had never seen this guy before and yet he was proving to be a tougher challenge than Iron Man. Bruce Lite, level 6 agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. This answer stunned Thor on the spot. A mere agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. dared disturb his battle? But before he was able to give it any more thought, Bruce had thrown dozens of flying knives towards him. Each knife had a grenade strapped around it, and soon only the sound of explosions remained. Boom! 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 Dozens of explosions rang out in a row and even Iron Man was a little surprised. If their opponent was an ordinary person, he would be dead 100 times over. But sadly for them, Thor was an Asgardian, and when it came to their physical body's durability, the people from Earth could not compare. And even worse, he was a son of Odin, which made him even more inherently powerful. Not only did Thor survive the dozens of grenades, it seemed that they didn't hurt him at all, they only managed to make him angrier instead. Ah, shit! Thor flew out instantly, becoming an elongated red streak of lightning in the process. His speed had exceeded the understanding and vision of ordinary people, which was why he had become what he had become in the eyes of the ordinary people. This was the first time that Bruce faced off against such a powerful opponent, so he had to take other measures in order to win. In the next second, Bruce had completely wrapped Thor up in his spiderwebs. While he was able to snap them instantly the previous time, this time it did not go like that. Bruce had wrapped him up extremely tight, he used enough spiderwebs to cover hundreds of giant trees, making Thor unable to move. Then, he threw his shield towards Thor and it hit him dead on. Bang, bang, bang. Bruce did not stop at one hit, he continued, and soon he had struck him over a dozen times in a row. The two sons of Odin, who was the master of Asgard, were beaten by Bruce in the same day. This fact Iron Man couldn't accept just yet. How was this guy only a level 6 agent? It was impossible. But in the next second, Thor managed to burst out his power, which got him out of his predicament. Immediately after that, he sent a lightning bolt with a diameter of more than a dozen meters towards Bruce. Such a ridiculously powerful lightning bolt even scared Bruce a little. But as he was trying to figure something out, lightning already struck. Boom! Against such a terrifying power, not to mention a human, even a building would be torn apart. Chapter 61, Hammer. Bruce knew that even though his body's defense was terrifying, there was no way he could hold out against this strike if he faced it head-on. He raised his shield and hid his whole body behind it. Just as the shield was raised, that terror of a lightning bolt struck Bruce's shield and a powerful energy spread out. Bruce felt as if he was pushing against a mountain and his body felt the pressure. If it wasn't for his body being strong enough, he wouldn't even be able to survive the aftermath of this lightning bolt. Boom! Instantly, the lightning flashed out once again and went into the forest. It was only until 6 seconds passed that Bruce felt the energy completely disappear. But after dealing with one problem, with the help of his spider telepathy, he sensed another powerful energy coming towards him. It surprised Bruce, who immediately shot out a web and positioned himself onto a tree. Bang! Sure enough, Thor had attacked again, but this time his attack hit the ground. And once more, the energy of this attack was powerful enough to deal severe damage to Bruce. Lay down your hammer. A voice came, whereafter a red and white shield appeared and beat Thor back, who wanted to attack again. Grasping this chance, Bruce madly shot out his spiderwebs and wrapped Thor up once again. This time, however, Thor couldn't shake them off so easily. Afterwards, Bruce threw his shield and hit Thor's head. Bang! Thor was forced to take a few steps backwards, before breaking himself out using his powerful strength. After getting free, he instantly prepared to summon his hammer again. But just as he wanted to attack again, Captain America walked up and looked at everyone with a serious expression on his face. Did you not cause enough trouble yet? Thor took a deep breath, his eyes still staring at Bruce. Just now, he had suffered a great loss at Bruce's hands, which made him very angry. But regardless, he knew that it was time to stop. If their fighting continued, there would be no end to it, or at least so he thought. Brat, I'll remember you. Thor grimly looked at Bruce as he said, his face looking very dark. He, a god, lost a fight with a mere human from Earth. It was way too disgraceful. If you dare to attack me again using your hammer, I promise, I won't hide my strength at all. He said calmly. Sure enough, Bruce wasn't one to show weakness, especially in moments like these. Enough, stop quarreling. We still have other things to do. Captain America took a deep breath to calm his nerves. These guys were too hard to manage, especially in this situation where his strength was not good enough. If it was not because he was older than them, Bruce and Thor might not even hear what he has to say and continue fighting. After hearing what Captain America had to say, Thor stopped and remained quiet. In fact, he was very shocked, because this guy wasn't here the last time he came to Earth. He knew of Captain America, Iron Man, and some of the others, but he had never heard about Bruce. Bruce, on the other hand, didn't care about Thor's thoughts, but remained quietly in one place, when the system's voice sounded out in his mind. Beep, the battle has ended, you have obtained 100 points of energy value. Sure enough, the more powerful the opponent was, the more energy value he would get from them. 100 points of energy value was a lot for the current him, it was enough to do a lot of things. And one of his most pressing matters at the moment was to download Iron Man's Mark 7 armor as soon as he could. Steve Rogers. At this time, the captain said his name and offered a handshake to Thor. After all, as the delegate of the Avengers, it was his duty to step up and mediate. Thor looked at him and also extended his hand. Thor. Afterwards, the captain looked at Iron Man, but Iron Man shrugged as he said, I haven't the habit of shaking hands with every circus performer I meet. These words almost made Thor go ballistic, but before anything happened Bruce walked in front of him. "What, you still want to fight me?" Thor looked at him coldly, whereas Bruce extended his right hand and said, "Bruce Lite." At this time, the smile on Bruce's face looked very kind as he stared at Thor. This made the people present all freeze, as they looked at Bruce with an inexplicable expression. Just now, the fight between these two guys had been so fierce that it seemed like one of them had to die before it was over or the fight wouldn't end. But now, 2 minutes later, Bruce was smiling politely at Thor. They couldn't process what was happening yet. But the captain was very satisfied as he nodded at Bruce. This was mature behavior in his eyes. Thor definitely held a grudge, but he also extended his hand out of politeness. And as usual, just as their hands touched, Thor's information appeared in Bruce's mind. Name, Thor Odinson. Identity, the god of thunder, Odin's eldest son. Ability, Asur's body, energy value, 50,000, controlling thunder and lightning, energy value, 5,000, Asur's strength, energy value, 3,000, Asur's speed, energy value, 1,500, Asur's longevity gene, energy value, 1,000 gigabytes. Heart of Justice, 1,000 gigabytes, the approval condition of Mjolnir, energy value, 20,000. Sure enough, Thor was worthy of being called one of the most powerful superheroes. Every ability he had was very useful and powerful, especially the Asur abilities, which all needed huge amounts of energy value. But the important thing to note here was that the system had said Asur and not God. This meant that Thor wasn't really a god, which was not a big surprise to Bruce. Bruce also noticed that Asur's speed needed a lot less energy value than the other Asur abilities. But this was also not a big surprise, considering that Thor's speed mostly relied on his hammer, Mjolnir. Mjolnir, on the other hand, required 20,000 points of energy value to be downloaded, which was an unobtainable amount for Bruce, at least for now. As for Asur's longevity gene, Bruce didn't have a need for it. What really interested Bruce was the Heart of Justice, the requirement to get Mjolnir's approval. There were only a couple of people that could lift Mjolnir in the Marvel movies, but this was decided based on the morals they held in their heart, and at the same time it was a curse Odin had casted on Mjolnir. But because Thor was an Asur, the curse hadn't revealed itself. Thinking up to here, Bruce's eyes flashed as he thought of something. If he could download this ability, that meant that he could also lift Mjolnir, which was a very powerful weapon. At present, Thor's power mostly came from his hammer. It was only after Thor, Ragnarok, that he was able to awaken his own power. That meant that if he could use Thor's hammer, he would basically be a human copy of Thor. Moreover, the data required was only 1,000 gigabytes, it was way too cost-effective. Thinking along those lines, Bruce instantly began downloading Heart of Justice. Beep, connection successful. Beep, Heart of Justice, size 1000 GB, download initializing. Beep, current download speed is 5 MB/s, effective range, 20 meters. Hearing this, a smile creeped up on Bruce's face as he bought the 1000x speedup. He really wondered what Thor's expression would be after he found out that he could also lift Mjolnir. Chapter 62, Lifting Thor's Hammer. But Thor, who had loosened his palm, didn't know any of that. He only knew that he was very dissatisfied with Bruce, as he thought that he only lost due to his negligence in their previous battle. But regardless, it was indeed not a good time to fight again, at least not at present. As for Bruce, he didn't say anything after his initial introduction, he merely waited in silence. The Heart of Justice only needed 5 to 6 more minutes to be downloaded under the 1000x download speedup. Bruce had everything in control right now. After seeing Bruce making the first move in reconciling with Thor, Captain America turned his sight to Iron Man, who was the hardest to manage in his eyes. After all, he was a multi-millionaire, so naturally he was proud and unruly in character. At least that was the captain's thoughts on that, which was why he felt that he was very hard to deal with. "Mr. Stark," said the captain, staring Iron Man down. If they wanted to truly have a hope of succeeding as the Avengers, at least they had to have solidarity. So when it came to the seemingly minor scuffle between Thor and Iron Man, he had to intervene before it grew out of hand. Iron Man's face revealed his dissatisfaction after hearing what Captain America said. This was his natural disposition. Moreover, he was extremely dissatisfied that Thor snatched Loki away right in front of him. And now that the captain was suggesting he shake hands with this guy who looked like he belonged in a circus, he was even more so. Bruce, on the other hand, merely stood aside, saying nothing. These superheroes' internal problems were the worst problem they had to face when it came to the first generation of the Avengers. But these things had nothing to do with Bruce. If someone was to be troubled about it, it should be the captain, not him. In his eyes, the most important thing right now was to improve his strength. In fact, if it wasn't for obtaining energy value and making the main story progress, he wouldn't even join in on the New York War. "Mr. Stark," Captain America said again after seeing that Iron Man hadn't responded. Meanwhile, Thor crossed his arms in front of his chest and stared at Iron Man as well. "Tony Stark." Truly helpless on the matter, Iron Man extended out his hand towards Thor. After all, Captain America was from his father's generation, who was also a superhero, so he had to show due respect. Thor, on the other hand, didn't care about any of that. He didn't like to think much as it is. It wasn't in his nature. Moreover, in his eyes, he had seen a lot of people with worse tempers than Iron Man. At this time, the three big shots of the Avengers were finally at peace, at least on the surface, under Captain America's lead. "Let's go, the Tesseract still hasn't been found, we still have a lot of things to do." The captain was also helpless. Iron Man, Thor, he just couldn't manage them all. And Bruce was also troublesome, making him mentally and somehow physically exhausted. If he had to be honest, he was especially worried about Bruce. He just couldn't see through the guy at all. He didn't even know what his purpose was. But despite all the unknowns about Bruce, he felt that Bruce wasn't their enemy and therefore not a threat to them. Thor and Iron Man nodded after hearing Captain America's words and prepared to leave this mountain forest. And for Bruce, their timing could not have been more perfect. Beep, download complete. Beep, congratulations, you've obtained the Heart of Justice ability. After the system finished talking, Bruce felt an unknown emotion rising up in his heart. This was the so-called ideology of absolute justice and purity, which could only be owned by people of noble character, being engraved within his heart. But just as the emotion and ideology rose, they were similarly immediately suppressed down by Bruce. With the help of the system, this ideology had become one of his abilities, but Bruce had never been a noble person, not before, not now, nor ever will be. On this point Bruce was sure of. Such an ideology of justice and purity was nothing in Bruce's eyes. He didn't care for it at all. If it wasn't for the fact that it was a requirement to lift Thor's hammer, as well as it not being able to affect him at all, Bruce wouldn't have downloaded this ability. He had never thought of himself as a savior of this world. In fact, if one of these days some superhero posed a threat to him or one of his plans, he would kill them where they stood without blinking. While Thor and maybe even Iron Man fit into that category, they had their uses and were valuable assets in Bruce's eyes, especially because he needed them alive to download the abilities he couldn't yet download off of them. In his previous fight with Thor, he had obtained 100 points of energy value, making him hit his temporary goal of obtaining enough to download Iron Man's Mark 7 armor. This was one of the most important things to him now, because as long as he got one Mark armor, he could continuously upgrade it using energy value. It was really way too worth it. Bruce decided not to act immediately though. He had enough time and would have plenty of chances to do that soon enough. In the meantime, Bruce set his eyes on Mjolnir. Now that he obtained the Heart of Justice, he wanted to try out his new ability, and if it worked. Without any further hesitation, Bruce walked directly toward Mjolnir. And at this time, all three of the Avengers' big shots saw Bruce's strange movement. What does this guy want to do? Iron Man asked with doubt in his eyes as he looked at Bruce. I don't know, I have never been able to see through him. The captain didn't really know how to reply to Iron Man. He could only tell him his thoughts. As a mortal, you dare try to lift my hammer? Did you know that this hammer was made by my father with the help of the dwarves using a stellar core that was about to die? Besides me, who owns the title of God of Thunder, no one could get its approval. Thor knew what Bruce wanted to do, but he didn't stop him. His hammer couldn't even be lifted by other Aesir, so how could a mere human from Earth be able to? After hearing what Thor said, Captain America and Iron Man also looked at Bruce with interest. No matter what the relation was between them, Thor was indeed a god in Northern Europe. For one man to hold such powerful strength, the captain had deemed it impossible, at least that was what he thought before meeting Thor, who changed his views of life itself. Iron Man was also clear about the terrifying energy contained within the stellar core. It wasn't something a human from Earth could handle. Loki, who was far away, also saw this scene. He too was interested in Bruce, but the matters regarding Thor's hammer couldn't be more clear to him, so he thought Bruce had no chance. The power within that hammer was tremendous. It was made by Odin, father of all the gods, and it contained his power as well as his curse. Meanwhile, at this moment, Bruce had walked up and was standing right in front of Mjolnir. He looked at the hammer in a calm manner. An inexplicable feeling rose up within him that made him believe he could make contact with the hammer in his heart. This feeling was very special, and at this moment, Bruce was certain that he would be able to lift it. "Listen, bloke, I advise you to give up. This hammer could only be lifted by my father and I. My father, being the king of the Aesir and the father of all the gods. So unless your strength is the same as my father, you won't be able to lift it. After all, the gap between a mortal and a god is not so easily closed," said Thor, very certain of himself. But at that moment, Bruce grabbed the hammer with his hands and directly lifted it up. With the hammer in hand, he looked at Thor and said, "You were saying?" Chapter 63, Shock. The hammer seemed to have lost all its weight in Bruce's hands as he moved it down and up time and time again. The legendary hammer Mjolnir was lifted so easily by a normal human, and in the meantime all of this was being displayed right in front of the three heads of the Avengers. As the master of the hammer, Thor instantly froze in place in confusion. Not only was he wrong, but he was even face-slapped so heavily. Just now he had said with full confidence that no one from Earth could lift his hammer. But in the very next second, Mjolnir was very easily lifted up and thrown around by Bruce, which completely blindsided him. This was the first time he saw anyone lift Mjolnir besides Odin and himself, and to make it worse it was even a human from Earth without the Aesir's bloodline, who had beaten him as well. To make the situation even worse, when he saw the doubtful expression on Bruce's face, he got even more embarrassed and didn't know what to say. On the other hand, Loki, who was standing on the mountaintop, was similarly shocked. He didn't even know this man existed before all of this, but he became the variable that shook everything. No, no, no. The plan still needs to go on. Loki thought in his head, and tried his best to suppress his shock. Both of the gods had been shocked this time around. An Earthling could actually beat both of them single-handedly. What a truly incredible thing that was. It was also beyond anyone's expectations. When Bruce lifted Mjolnir, he didn't have any other intent. Sure, he wanted to take it for himself, but this wasn't the time to do that. Moreover, if he had the required energy value, he could just download the hammer directly. Even though it needed a lot of energy value, the downloaded Mjolnir would only be owned and wielded by him. But Bruce wasn't in a rush. As long as he kept up the battles, he would eventually get the required energy value. His most recent fight with Thor, for example, although it wasn't really a fight, it still got him 100 points of energy value. Based on Bruce's conjectures, if the battle was one that decided the life and death of the participants, he would get a lot more energy value. The amount of energy value he got was based off of the opponent's strength, the type of battle it was, etc. The more fierce a battle was, the more energy value he would get and vice versa. "Okay, let's go back," Captain America spoke again. They couldn't continue to procrastinate here. Following which, Iron Man and Thor nodded. While Iron Man was still in shock as well, Thor had gotten over it and was just embarrassed at this point. Seeing that, Bruce smiled and handed back Mjolnir to Thor, who merely lowered his head that was still in chaos. After that, they took Loki back to the plane and flew toward the air base of S.H.I.E.L.D. In the main room of the helicarrier, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury and his close aide Coulson also saw the terrifying display of strength that Bruce made. Surprisingly, Fury was more shocked, as he didn't even know there was such an agent in his own organization. Coulson, do you know him? He could actually fight with Thor to a standstill. Fury said as he looked at him, after all he was Coulson's man. Before this, I had felt that he was very unusual, but that was it. It's very probable that he is a human superhero that we hadn't discovered before. The human superhero category that Coulson talked about were actually people that had the chance to become an Avenger. With Bruce's strength, he was fully qualified to join the Avengers plan and become an Avenger. Mr. Fury, do you want me to talk to him about joining the Avengers? Coulson also wanted Bruce to join the Avengers, as he was one of his agents and their power overall would grow at the same time. We need our own people, Fury said. He thought that Bruce should not join the Avengers, because in his eyes, if Bruce really had superpowers, he could become their trump card. And Coulson apparently agreed with this sentiment as he nodded. After all, the Shield couldn't rely on the Avengers for everything. Even Baron hadn't joined the Avengers until later on, so he wasn't regarded as one of their own. But Bruce, on the other hand, wasn't like that. They knew everything about him very clearly, and he was truly regarded as one of their own. Okay, I'll go see that so-called god, Fury said. Just as the plane landed, Fury saw Bruce and company come back. Before this event, he had suffered great losses at the hands of Loki, so he had to redeem himself now. Meanwhile, at this time, Captain America, Black Widow and Thor had landed and left first, leaving Bruce to report to Coulson. After which, Iron Man took off his armor and left the area together with Coulson. After downloading so many abilities, Bruce had gotten a lot stronger than before, to the point that it was incomparable. There were a lot of abilities making him stronger right now, but more abilities didn't necessarily mean that he was stronger. So the next thing he needed to do was to continue developing the main story of the plot and unlock more functions from the system. He was especially eyeing the fusion function. It was the one he wanted most at the moment. All of his abilities, after undergoing planned fusions, would become more powerful and overall more perfect. Perhaps the abilities related to his body and genes he had downloaded would even make him a godly gene after fusing them all. And as his abilities got more and more powerful, eventually in the end, he would really become a god. But all of this talk about becoming a god was way too early. His goal at present was to download Iron Man's Mark 7 armor and go from there. As long as he could get his hands on one suit, he could upgrade it continuously and use only that one suit. Thinking along those lines, Bruce arrived at the main area of the helicarrier. Meanwhile, Banner, Thor, Captain America and the Black Widow were all getting together to discuss the events that transpired this time. I thought his surrender this time around was too simple. Black Widow's viewpoint was the same as Captain America's. They both thought that Loki's intentions wouldn't be so simple. Yes, that guy is smart as well. Though I think he is a madman for actually wanting to use the Tesseract's power. Banner said, agreeing with both of them. The Tesseract emitted gamma rays, and no one knew better than Banner exactly how dangerous those gamma rays were. Even if one had an Acer's strong body, it made no difference. Be careful what you say, he is an Acer and my brother. Thor warned Banner. He didn't like someone evaluating his own brother in this way. He has killed 70 to 80 people in 2 days, and most of these people were unarmed, Bruce said. He walked up just as the Captain and Black Widow were struggling to mediate the dispute. He was wearing a black suit which amplified the momentum his very tall body naturally produced. And because of his previous fight, no one neglected him. Loki is my father's adopted son. I don't know him very well, Thor said. He revealed that his relationship with Loki wasn't very good and directly distanced himself from him. He has found Iridium, said Iron Man, who appeared alongside Coulson. And as soon as he walked in, Bruce's feverish eyes fell upon him. Chapter 64, Successful. Although Bruce had been itching for a chance to get close to Iron Man again, he decided not to act immediately. What does he want to do with it? Black Widow and Captain America were a bit puzzled, as they weren't clear on the Iridium's properties and its uses. Before this, I have obtained some information that supposedly, the Tesseract can make a very unstable warp gate, which is where the iridium comes in to act as a stabilizer. Bruce stood there and revealed what was on his mind, going by his previous knowledge from the Marvel movies. Everyone present turned to look towards Bruce, including and especially Iron Man and Dr. Banner. It wasn't a surprise that they would be a little shocked. After all, who would expect Bruce to actually understand the sciences as well? Is every agent of S.H.I.E.L.D the same as you nowadays? Dr. Banner asked. At this point, he also realized that Bruce definitely wasn't simple. I just enjoy studying more than others, that's all. Bruce smiled, not wanting to explain himself too much. As long as the plot kept developing, he would be satisfied. As for what his influence would manifest as a result, Bruce didn't know nor care. After all, neither S.H.I.E.L.D. nor the Avengers were one of his goals, so regarding their thoughts on him, naturally Bruce wasn't interested. Everyone present also didn't think too much on the matter. Back to the matter at hand, Loki was arrested, but the Tesseract had yet to be found. Their task this time involved the retrieval of the Tesseract, and if it wasn't found, their task would be deemed as incomplete, regardless of the fact that they had captured Loki. The people present were quite smart, and they knew that Loki's intentions were certainly not simple. They all needed to be careful, for if Loki's plan was successful, he might open a warp gate and summon something out. If that really happened, it would be a disaster on the scale that they probably couldn't handle. They have found everything they need. If they want to open a warp gate, the only thing they're missing is a powerful energy source, otherwise they can't keep the warp gate active for long enough. Iron Man was truly worthy of being called a genius. He knew a lot about this, even though it was a field he hadn't previously studied, he still managed to figure out Loki's plan in a short period of time. This was why one of his abilities was the super brain, which everyone wished they had, especially Bruce. The others all agreed with Iron Man's viewpoint as he was the specialist on these matters. Mr. Stark, if my guess is correct, Stark Industries should have already begun new energy tests which have been very successful. Bruce looked at Iron Man with a smile, but the person in question didn't get what he was trying to convey. Yes, as long as the conditions are right, he could open a warp gate, said Banner. Bruce's conversation with Iron Man had provoked deep thought on his part, and this was the first time he spoke during the entirety of it. Oh, it seems that Dr. Banner also knows a lot regarding this matter. Dr. Banner, I'm a huge fan of yours. I especially enjoy your impressive look when you become a big green monster. Iron Man teasingly said while walking towards him. But the words he said made everyone present shake with fear for a second. They all knew how terrifying Dr. Banner would become after his transformation, so they were all dissatisfied with Iron Man for saying that. Dr. Banner won't be joining the battle, his task was helping us trace the Tesseract and nothing more. Fury walked out at the opportune moment and said, making Banner release a sigh of relief. If a battle broke out, the helicarrier would become a very dangerous place to be in, and almost 80% of the people in it would most likely fall to their death. Let's talk about Loki's scepter, as it's definitely not simple since Barton was controlled, and yet Bruce was fine, which is very surprising to say the least. The words didn't have any other meaning behind them, they were just curious as to how Bruce avoided being controlled. This was also what everyone else had wanted to know. That scepter was definitely very special, and everyone present could feel the powerful energy it possessed. And yet Bruce was fine, which made them very interested. Some people are just talented, you all shouldn't get jealous, said Bruce. He wouldn't explain himself just because they wanted him to. Right now, he was standing together with the Avengers, which meant that the S.H.I.E.L.D. had taken him seriously. Naturally, this was all because of the strength he had revealed. I like the way you speak now, said Iron Man. This was the first time he saw someone who was more arrogant than him. Let's get to know each other a bit better then, shall we, said Bruce, extending his hand towards him. Bruce Lite, this time it's official. Bruce walking towards Iron Man made him feel strange, and everyone present looked at them as well. Before this, Coulson had already taken Bruce to see Iron Man, and they had introduced themselves there, so he didn't see a reason to do it again. Even a genius like him couldn't understand this, but seeing Bruce extend his hand, he also did the same. Tony Stark, he said, his tone solemn. This was different from their first meeting, as this time Iron Man nodded as a show of respect for Bruce's strength. Being powerful was most important indeed, no matter where one was. Just as their hands touched, Iron Man's information appeared in front of Bruce. Name, Tony Stark. Identity, Iron Man, Chairman of Stark Industries. Ability, Super Brain, Energy Value, 10,000, Business Management, 50 GB, Top-Level Fighting Technique, 620 MB, Mark 7 Armor, Energy Value, 50. Super Brain was the ability Bruce most wanted, but he still couldn't download, making him sigh for a split second. After which, he directly downloaded Iron Man's Mark 7 Armor without hesitating. Beep, connection successful. Beep, the Mark 7 Armor ability requires 50 points of energy value to be downloaded. Begin download. Yes. Beep, download complete. Beep, congratulations, you've obtained the Mark 7 Armor. Energy value was different from data, as he could download abilities with just one click compared to waiting for it to finish if he used energy value. Right now, Bruce had 2 superhero-level weapons in his system's warehouse, which made him very satisfied. Well, you can take your time and continue your discussion, I'm going back to get some rest. After saying that, Bruce directly left the cabin. Since he had gotten the ability he had originally come for, he decided he still had other things to do and left. In this particular situation, the plot wouldn't change much, at least not because of it. Seeing Bruce leave, no one decided to stop him. Although Bruce was one of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s people, they wouldn't restrict and manage him too much, this was because he had the strength they needed. He is very good, this time around S.H.I.E.L.D. has gotten another talent, said Iron Man. Afterwards, they continued to discuss what they should do next. Meanwhile, Bruce had returned to his room. This marks the end of Part 8 of the story Marvel Unlimited Skills, I Can Download. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.